Do you ever feel like a hamster on a hamster wheel, not getting anywhere new? Perhaps you've hit a plateau that has you asking, is this it? Have you accomplished all you've set out to do in life and are not feeling as fulfilled as you thought you would? It is normal at midlife to reassess what's working for you and what's not. It's also normal to want to reclaim your time, your energy, and your joy. Let's make the best out of the second half of our lives by having more fun, experiencing more peace, and feeling more joy. If any of this resonates with you, then this podcast is for you. I'm Megan Bayless-Bartley. Now let's get ready to shift our shit.
Good morning and welcome. We're so excited to welcome our special guest today, Ashley Vaden. She's one of our awesome therapists at the Mindfulness Center. She has done some really great mindfulness classes. Sometimes we get asked about mindfulness classes. Ashley's one of our instructors for those. And we were chatting before we came on to think about, like, if today was your favorite dessert, what would, or even like ice cream, flavor, what would today be for you, Ashley?
Yeah. I'm not sure if you've ever had them, but they're called Portuguese tarts.
Oh.
And they have like a special ingredient in them, and I could eat probably like 5 in one sitting because they're just that delicious.
Is it like fruit or chocolate?
No,
or
it's like a custard tart.
Okay.
But it's very sweet.
Yeah.
So it's like a flaky pastry and custard, and it's just great.
When were you exposed to this dessert?
So they used to make them at Whole Foods, and you could buy them, but I haven't found them in a while. So maybe if I put this out there, then the guests will be able to tell me where I can find Portuguese tarts again.
Yeah, or at Whole Foods needs to be listening.
Yes.
And
yes.
We'll put a little hashtag there.
Bring it back.
Portuguese tarts, because I'm sure there's not many searches for that.
And every time I would go, they would be out. So I know that they're popular. But
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to say, probably my all-time favorite dessert. I do love chocolate chip cookies, like really generic, but I also really like brownies. And today I was thinking about brownies. I love chocolate, but I'm gluten-free, so it has to be like sometimes, gluten-free stuff is not always done well. So I get really, really picky. So when I'm in like really big cities, like San Francisco or New York City, I'm always like, where is the top rated gluten-free bakery, because I'm like, I gotta taste, I gotta sample all those things. So
yes.
Yeah, I think, brownies. Today's, good day.
That sounds good. Yeah.
We're rocking it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to our podcast. You've been on here before. We loved having you. And
it's good to be back.
Yes, we want to find out more about you. So, we're recording this in Louisville, Kentucky. That's where sort of our headquarters are based right now. And so Are you from Louisville? Have you always lived in Louisville? Like, what's your story?
Yeah.
Tell us.
Yeah. So I actually was born and raised in Frankfurt. And my parents separated when I was quite young, but both decided to stay in Frankfurt. So I would kind of go back and forth. And it was interesting to kind of adjust to both households.
Sure.
And in middle school, my mom remarried and we moved to Shelby County. So it was kind of a big culture shock because, believe it or not, Frankfurt actually felt very urban for me and very diverse. And then when we kind of moved to the country, it was much different.
Sure.
So definitely kind of a culture shock moment for me. I definitely really enjoyed that time because it helped me learn to focus on school. Because as I was initially adjusting, I didn't have a lot of friends and I didn't have a lot of social connections. And I decided that I really wanted to kind of focus on my studies because that's what was going to get me where I wanted to be in life. So that's kind of, I'm very appreciative for that time in my life because it helped me learn to be a student and I guess learn to fall in love with learning, which has kind of been a theme throughout the rest of my story. I feel like
Yes.
if I could be paid to be a student, I would do that. I would love to just be paid to just show up on beautiful college campuses and learn from brilliant minds.
Yes. I
So
totally get that.
that would be my dream career.
Well, you
But
said
yes.
something there about you wanted to focus on your studies so you could do what you wanted to accomplish. What did you think as like a high schooler that you wanted to be when you grew up?
Yeah, I guess I wasn't sure. I knew that I wanted to learn the most I could about the field that I was in and always be interested. Because I remember my parents were blue collar, really hardworking people, but I just remember how much work caused them stress.
Mm,
And my dad would always really try not to take work home with him, but I could always tell that that kind of thing would weigh on them and they would often feel like stuck in their career. And I just knew I wanted to have the ability to wear multiple hats, and have something that I could continuously be excited about learning about. So that's kind of all I knew.
Yeah. Yeah, and when
then
you
it
went
just
when you went
yeah,
to college, what do you think you would study, or did you have any? Was therapist on your radar?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to study psychology because I'd done some therapy in high school and it honestly changed my life.
Yes. Yes.
It was incredibly helpful. It was incredibly helpful for me personally, for my relationship with my mom. And so I knew I was very interested in psychology and how we work and how we tick. And so I just kind of continued to do well in that field and kind of continued to be interested in it. So just kind of followed that path.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
did you go to grad school right after undergrad?
I took a year off to actually like bartend and serve, but that
Okay.
really helped me appreciate I want to go back
Yes.
to school.
I did the same.
Yeah,
Yep.
had fun. That's its own psychology degree, really, in and of
Absolutely.
itself.
Yep.
But I knew I really wanted to pursue a higher level of education, so I applied to a few different schools and actually got into grad school at the University of Rochester. And my first year there was actually quite an experience because I got a vaccine. I got the Gardasil vaccine when I first started, and I had an adverse reaction to one of the ingredients in the vaccine. And so I had to drop out of school for a year because I got just very sick. And my mom had to take care of me, and I wasn't really sure if I would go back to school, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. But then I remember listening to your podcast that you wanted to be a naturopath.
Yes.
And a naturopath is, I found a good naturopathic provider that helped me heal my body and recover.
Yes.
And so then I went back to school the next year and actually finished early because I found out I was expecting with my son.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah, it was kind of a wild time, but I remember talking to one of my professors when I was in my first trimester, and I was telling her I'm really kind of worn down. I'm really feeling the fatigue. And I'm not sure I can do this. And she was like, if you don't like kick it into high gear, you're not going to graduate. And I was like, all right, that's all I need to hear. Okay. So I just kind of did what I needed to do and actually graduated a couple of months early.
Wow.
And had my son 6 days after that.
Oh my God.
And then moved back to Kentucky 6 days after I had him.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It was kind of crazy.
Oh my.
But my mom had come up to help me. She'd come up to Rochester to help me when I had him. And then when she was ready to go, I was like, I need you. I can't do this without you. So I like packed up all my stuff, and because I'd had my degree, I had everything I needed at that point. And my roommate was okay with it. And I just went back to Kentucky with my mom just for her to help me in that new phase of life. But it's kind of a whirlwind.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. Yes. I mean, I'm thinking, I love the podcast We Can Do Hard Things, Glennon
Mhm.
Doyle's podcast. And so I'm just thinking about how you can do hard things,
Yes.
like
Yes.
6 days and 6 days. That is not much time.
Yes. I know it was pretty crazy. But I'm definitely thankful. I feel like I've always had those voices in my life that have just been like, if you don't do this, then it's not going to work out. And as much as
Yes.
I, needed empathy and compassion, I also kind of needed someone to tell me what to
Yeah.
do. She was
Yeah.
like, if you don't do this, you're not going to graduate. And I was like, okay, that's all I needed to hear because I really need to get this degree.
Mhm.
But I remember feeling quite burnt out by therapy when I ended grad school because I had been so hitting it
Yes.
hard.
Yes.
So I really, initially I was like, am I going to be a therapist again? Am I going to really pursue this as a career? Because I was thinking like, I want to go into fashion or I want to move to New York and
Yes.
all of the things. But I knew like to support my son and to pay off student loans, it made most sense for me to use my degree.
Yes.
And honestly, thankfully I did because I found my first job at 7 Counties working with Keith Williams, who's another therapist here.
Yes.
And it was a very profound, life-changing experience, right place, right time kind of a thing. Taught me so much about how to be a good parent, actually, because I was working with kids that I remember saying in grad school, I never want to have kids. I never want to work with kids.
Oh,
and
no.
I had a child.
Surprise!
And in my first job, I was working with children. And I really loved it. I loved working with kids. So it's just funny how things work out when you look back at it.
Yes. Yeah. So what are you doing now in therapy? So you transitioned. Do you want to tell the story about how you came to the Mindfulness Center?
Yeah. So I'd been working at Acute for about 5 years at that point, and it was a very high intense, high fast paced place, on call, not a 40-hour work week by any means. And I was getting to a place where I just wanted more flexibility and freedom to be with my kiddo. And so, and Megan had hosted a few of our retreats and kind of come and made a presentation. And I really kind of fell in love with her style and who she was. And I was like, I want to go work for her. And I remember, contacting you. And I remember being really afraid to tell Keith, my boss, at the time that I was leaving. But I remember when I told him, he said, I'm going to come too. He said, I'm actually going to work there as well. And I just remember feeling like such relief. And also like, this is kind of meant to be, this is my next step. So it was just kind of confirmation, but I remember just feeling so sad to leave him, but so relieved that he was coming with me.
Well, and you know how I remember this too, because Keith and I went to grad school together back in 2001 to 2003. So we've been friends for 20 plus years. And I remember I hadn't said anything to Keith. You hadn't said anything to Keith. And so I imagine when you told him, he hadn't talked to me yet. Like I, throughout the years, had been like saying, whenever you're ready, Keith, whenever you're ready, whenever you're ready, Keith, I'm ready for you, whenever you're ready, like I'm sort of building this thing for us, and like even Elizabeth, who's on our team too, I'm like, guys, come on, I'm building this thing for us,
Yes.
And so I think, I think that honestly, you gave him permission. Like he saw the strength in you to do this big move, and go into private practice. And, there's a lot of differences of working full time for an agency and then transitioning into a private practice. So I think, because then, he was like, oh, then he was like, okay, Megan, I'm ready to come work for you. So I timeline wise, Keith and I hadn't had that conversation yet. So
So
anyway,
funny.
It's worked out very well. It's worked out very well. And then COVID hit, right?
Yes. Yes.
My
goodness.
That was the January of 2020.
Yeah, 2020. It was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing about you, I've always been so impressed with you because you just like came in and you hit the ground running and I'll do anything, whatever you need me to do, and I kind of just let you go because I didn't need to supervise you, and I'm not used to, like usually people come in as supervisees, and I kind of let you go, and it was like a year and a half later when you're like, I think I want to learn this other thing, and I was like, oh shit, I've just let her go on her own, like I felt so, I don't know, like I had done you a disservice, like I
Mm.
had, but maybe that's also what you needed. You needed to just kind of
Yeah.
like fly and do your thing and just,
Yeah.
find the success that you did. I mean, I see you as, one of our most successful therapists at the Mindfulness Center.
Yeah. Thank you. And I remember being just really intimidated by telehealth, believe it or
Yeah.
not. Like, how am I going to be an effective therapist using this modality? But I do remember I'll take whatever, because I'd come from acute where we did take whatever.
Yes.
And it was, it's kind of
Yeah.
like, I felt like a seasoned warrior at that point, and
Yes.
kind of was just ready to go. But you've always been very, I knew you were always there if I needed you.
Good.
So
Good. Of course. Yes.
yes.
Well, I know you love internal family systems, IFS. So can
Yes.
you tell us a little bit about IFS and how, I know they talk a lot about that on the We Can Do Hard Things podcast, because I know people who listen to both of our podcasts and are like, you need somebody to talk more about what
Yes.
IFS really is.
Yes.
So can you give us like a brief kind of overview and then why you sort of fell in love with that modality?
Yes. So internal family systems is basically this idea that within us, we are comprised of multiple parts. And really, it's a theory of getting to know these parts and seeing their positive intention for us, as well as learning more about our true self and being in the energy of self. And I remember learning about internal family systems in school, but really didn't dive into it until my own therapist practiced it with me, and I could feel the difference and feel its effectiveness. So it's, like there are all sorts of theories of multiplicity, like Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, essentially. Like the spirit
Yeah.
is comprised of 3 different parts. So that's kind of how I think of our brain, our mind, our body. And I really like IFS because coming from, systems theory and family therapy, you're used to working with multiple people in the room, but there are times when that's not always possible for a client. Their family doesn't want to engage, or they've cut off contact with their family, or their spouse doesn't want to come to therapy. So I found IFS really empowering for those people. How can you feel a difference in your life without necessarily outward change?
Yeah.
How can you bring about change from within?
Yes.
If nothing else around you changes, how can you still change?
Yes.
That's what I love about IFS. And I love how there's this idea of unconditional positive regard for ourselves. And there is no kind of self-sabotage. It's all,
Yes.
hey, I'm trying to protect myself in some way. Maybe I'm
Yep.
not going about it in the best way, but it's all from a place of love. And for me, that really like changed the game. To see myself from a place of, oh, I'm not self-sabotaging. I'm actually looking out for myself.
Right.
But I'm doing it in this really terrible way. That's
Right.
interesting.
Yeah.
And then you start to ask more questions, and you start to get to know yourself more deeply, and you just have some epiphanies, and it's really, really cool stuff. So, and it goes along with hypnosis, where it's inviting people to come into a trance, and then I get into a trance. Like I'll invite my clients to close their eyes, and I will close my eyes so I can get more deep into the work with them, and it helps me focus and concentrate. So it's very cool. It's just very cool stuff.
Yes. I love, yeah, I mean, many of our therapists, but you and I have had this conversation around like really using intuition, of like using our own intuition and then connecting with the clients from this very intuitive space and
Yes.
inviting them to, connect with themselves, because sometimes we're just so in our heads all the time
Yes.
or we're doing and we're busy, and it's like more about this being space of like
Yes.
just gonna be here and see what shows up, or ask the questions to see what answers I get. So it's not a cognitive process so
Yep.
much. It's more of a very, it can be a very spiritual process,
Mm-hmm.
that very intuitive, which I think resides kind of in that emotional state, this sort
Mm-hmm.
of very kind of watery, like you can't
Yeah.
really grasp it. It just is there, and
Yeah.
but it's so powerful.
It is. And
Hmm.
humbling, because you're like, oh, I
Yes.
didn't know that about myself. I didn't know that part was there. When you
Yes.
access your intuition and you meet new parts of yourselves,
Yes.
you're like, oh, I don't know everything about me. What
Yes.
more is there to learn?
Exactly. And at
Yes.
different phases of your life too,
Yes.
right? Like, I mean, that's where, I'm learning even now. Like, I've done this sort of deep dive for myself in the last 2 years, and just yesterday, had this session with my therapist where I was like, all this stuff in the last 2 years has led to this, like, realization, like, and I'm like, why couldn't I have just bypassed all that stuff, like, but then I was like, I don't think I could have. I think I
Mhm.
needed to do all that. It was a
Mhm.
process,
Mhm.
like there's that idea that you have to go through a process, which is sometimes not fun and hard and expensive and all the different things, but it's that, progress. We're
Yep.
progressing. We're going,
Yep.
we're continuing to evolve.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes.
Well, anything else you want to say before we're going to wrap up this part one, and we're going to dive into part two, and Ashley's going to tell us about her own experience with
Okay.
therapy. Anything else you want to tell
I
us
don't
about?
I
No?
don't think so. I don't think so.
I will say Ashley is probably one of our most sought after therapist. So while she probably doesn't need any new clients, you are welcome to check her out online and schedule a 10-minute free consult. But she is in high demand in our practice, and she's killing it. She might have a waiting list right now, but she's always looking for fun people to work with.
Yes.
So if she
Yes.
resonates with you, please let her know and reach out to her. But we'll find out more about Ashley and Ashley's own personal therapy here in part two.
Thanks, Megan.